Do you really know who you are? Or are you just living what is expected of you? It's strange to think that in an age of so much information and exposure, most people still live disconnected from themselves. We try to appear confident, happy, and successful, but often it's all just a performance. Deep down, something feels off, as if we're playing a role that, somewhere along the way, no longer makes sense. This feeling of emptiness, of not belonging, can disguise itself as anxiety, lack of motivation, or even constant fatigue. And this is where one of Carl Jung's most powerful ideas comes in, that the most important journey in life is to know yourself. Because when you don't know who you are, everything you build, relationships, career, dreams, ends up being based on an illusion. In this video, we'll explore how true self-knowledge, inspired by Jung's ideas, can literally change everything, from how you relate to others to the most profound decisions in your life. Before we continue, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. This helps us continue to create content with depth and purpose. Now, let's understand what it really means to know yourself, from the perspective of someone who has dedicated his life to studying the human soul. Self-knowledge, according to Carl Jung, the encounter with the self. For Carl Jung, knowing yourself was not a superficial exercise in self-discovery, but a deep, courageous, and often uncomfortable journey. He wasn't talking about knowing your tastes, preferences, or abilities. He was talking about something more essential, discovering who you are behind your masks, fears, and conditioning. Jung believed that within each of us, there is a kind of psychic map, with conscious regions and other hidden ones which we rarely explore. For him, the human being is composed of different parts that coexist and, at times, come into conflict. Among these parts, 4 stand out: ego, persona, shadow, and self. The ego is what you call me in everyday life, your conscious identity, your memories, decisions, and rational thoughts. The persona is the social mask you wear to fit in, please, or survive in certain environments. The shadow represents everything you hide from yourself: repressed desires, traits considered unacceptable, painful memories. And finally, the self, which Jung considered the center of the psyche, the true me, complete and integrated, which goes beyond the ego. Self-knowledge, therefore, is not about strengthening the ego, but about getting closer to the self. It is a process of integrating the conscious and unconscious parts of who we are. This means recognizing both what we show to the world and what we prefer to hide. It is looking within and embracing not only the lights, but also the shadows. Jung called this process individuation, and it doesn't happen automatically or quickly. It requires attention, a willingness to remain silent, the courage to face uncomfortable truths, and, above all, the desire to be authentic, even if that means breaking with patterns that seemed safe. Nowadays, it is common to confuse self-knowledge with shallow self-help or ready-made motivational phrases, but Jung warns us, there is no growth without internal confrontation. There is no awakening without first going through the darkness. Knowing yourself is therefore an act of truth and also of love, because it requires us to stop running away from ourselves. But where does this process begin? Jung gives us a clear clue. The first step is to look at the mask we wear every day, the one that protects us but also limits us, the one that makes us seem strong but prevents us from being real. It's time to understand this mask. In the next chapter, we'll explore the persona, the face we show the world, and how it distances us from who we really are. The persona, the mask you don't even realize you're wearing. Imagine you are in a work meeting. Even though you are tired and full of doubts, you smile, speak firmly, and pretend to be in control. Later, you meet up with friends, and even though you feel emotionally drained, you remain cheerful and helpful. At home, with your family, you try to maintain the image of someone who can handle everything. And when you are finally alone, you feel an emptiness that you cannot explain. This is the effect of the persona, the mask we all wear, often without realizing it. Carl Jung defined the persona as the social identity we project to the world. It is a necessary construct. It allows us to live in society, adapt, maintain bonds, and even protect our privacy. The problem begins when we confuse the mask with the face, when we identify so much with the role we play that we forget who we are behind it. The persona is shaped from an early age. It begins when we learn what is acceptable and what is not. At home, at school, among friends. Little by little, we suppress parts of ourselves in order to be accepted. If you were taught not to show weakness, you probably grew up hiding your emotions. If you were always expected to be the funny one, you may have learned to disguise your sadness with jokes. These adaptations form layers of the persona. It's like armor. It protects, yes, but it also restricts. You may be seen as a sociable, trustworthy, well-adjusted person, but deep down, you feel suffocated, as if you're trapped in a role you didn't choose. And no matter how hard you try to maintain your poise, your emotional energy starts to run out. It's the invisible cost of living to meet expectations. Over time, this internal disconnection can generate symptoms that are difficult to identify. Anxiety for no clear reason, existential crises, the feeling of living on autopilot. You complete tasks, smile in photos, respond to messages, but something inside you remains silent, waiting to be acknowledged. Jung saw the persona as inevitable, but he warned it should be a tool, not a prison. When we believe we are only the mask, we block contact with other parts of our being, especially what Jung called the shadow. And it is precisely in the shadow that many of the elements we repress to keep our persona intact are found. Fragility, fear, desire, anger, insecurity. That which we deny in ourselves, but which continues to exist, hidden, influencing our choices, sabotaging relationships, and fueling internal conflicts. Recognizing your persona is the beginning of awakening. It's when you start asking yourself, is this version of myself that I present to the world really who I am? Or is it who I've been taught I should be? This simple question can trigger profound changes, because to live authentically, you need to have the courage to peel back the false layers and rediscover forgotten parts of yourself. Not to reject the persona, but to no longer be held hostage by it. True freedom comes when you choose who you want to be, and no longer react only to what the world expects. In the next chapter, we'll delve into these hidden parts, the aspects of yourself that have been rejected, hidden, or judged. It's time to face the shadow and discover that there may be a power within it that you haven't yet recognized. The shadow, the side you pretend doesn't exist. Have you ever found yourself criticizing someone with disproportionate intensity? Have you ever felt repulsed or irritated by behavior that, if you looked closely, might reflect something of yourself? Or have you ever reacted impulsively and then asked yourself, why did I act that way? These are clear signs that your shadow is trying to show itself. For Carl Jung, the shadow is the sum total of everything we reject in ourselves. These are impulses, emotions, desires, memories, and traits that we have learned to suppress because at some point we were told that they were wrong, ugly, or unacceptable. Throughout our lives, we build an idealized image of who we should be: strong, kind, rational, productive. And to sustain this image, we begin to bury everything that doesn't fit in with it. Anger, envy, fear, laziness, jealousy, vulnerability. These contents don't disappear. They hide. And that's precisely where the danger lies. The shadow acts unconsciously. The more we deny it, the more it finds indirect ways to manifest itself. Emotional outbursts, self-sabotage, destructive relationships, projections onto others. It's like trying to keep a ball submerged in water. The harder you try to hide it, the more tension it builds up until one day it simply escapes. That's why Jung said that until you make conscious what is in the unconscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it destiny. The key to dealing with the shadow is not to fight it, but to acknowledge it. It's to stop pretending it doesn't exist. This takes courage, because it means looking at parts of yourself that you might prefer not to see. But it's also an act of power, because the shadow isn't just a repository of bad stuff. It often holds repressed qualities like creativity, sensuality, assertiveness, intuition, and strength. Maybe you were taught not to assert yourself and buried your ability to say no. Maybe you were taught not to feel anger, and now you allow abuse to keep the peace. Maybe you hide your ambition for fear of appearing arrogant. Integrating the shadow is about reclaiming those denied parts. It's about expanding your consciousness and becoming more whole. A fundamental step in this process is to observe your judgments. What you criticize most in others, usually says more about you than it does about them. Irritation can be a mirror. What you condemn in others can reveal what you have not yet accepted in yourself. Another important point is to understand that integrating the shadow does not mean acting impulsively or justifying harmful behaviors. It is not about releasing anger uncontrollably, for example, but about recognizing it, listening to it, understanding where it comes from, and then, yes, finding healthy ways to express it. This process is painful at times, but it is also liberating. When you acknowledge your shadow, it loses its power to control you behind your back. You begin to act with more awareness, less reactivity, and more compassion for yourself and others. The shadow is a portal to growth. Jung saw this encounter as one of the most important steps on the path to self-knowledge, because only those who have the courage to face what lies in the shadows are able to awaken the true light that exists within them. And it is at this point that the journey deepens. After recognizing the persona and integrating the shadow, a new calling arises, to bring all these parts together into a truer, more whole, more free identity. This is the next step on the inner journey. In the next chapter, we will explore what Jung called the process of individuation and how it guides us to ultimately become who we came into the world to be. The individuation process, the journey to becoming whole. By now, you have begun to remove the mask of the persona and face the hidden contours of the shadow. But the inner journey proposed by Jung does not end there. On the contrary, it is at this point that it truly begins to gain depth. Jung called this path individuation. But what does that mean exactly? Individuation is the process of becoming who you truly are. Not what others expect, not what you have learned to appear to be, but what already exists in essence within you, waiting to be revealed and lived. It's a movement of integration, where the fragmented parts of the psyche begin to align. It's not about eliminating the persona or destroying the shadow. They are part of the whole. Individuation is like putting together a jigsaw puzzle. The more pieces you recognize, the clearer the outline of your identity becomes. This journey requires courage, because many times you will need to break with old versions of yourself. You will feel like you are unlearning everything you thought you were. At times it may even seem like you are losing yourself, but in reality, you are finding yourself for the first time. Jung said that the encounter with the self is, at the same time, the most sublime and the most terrible of human experiences. Sublime because it brings inner freedom. Terrible because it requires overcoming the discomfort, fear, and resistance we create to avoid pain. It is important to understand the process of individuation is not linear. It is not a ladder that you climb step by step. It is more like a spiral. You advance, retreat, discover, get confused, reintegrate, and with each turn, you deepen your understanding of who you are. On this path, silence gains value. Solitude becomes fertile, introspection becomes a compass, and external life, once full of distractions, begins to lose strength in the face of the vast world that exists within you. But the most fascinating thing is that, as you become more whole, your relationships also change. You stop expecting others to fill your voids. You start relating from authenticity, not neediness. Your choices change. Your boundaries become clearer. Your presence becomes stronger. Individuation is ultimately an act of profound self-love, not the kind of love that is based on empty affirmations or shaky self-esteem, but the kind that comes from total acceptance, light and shadow, strength and fragility, chaos and center. It is the kind of love that allows you to stop seeking approval and start actually living in truth. And how does all this translate into practice? How does this internal process reflect on daily decisions, relationships, and the way you see yourself and the world? That's what we'll talk about in the next chapter. The concrete changes that happen when you start to really know yourself, and the transformative impact that has on every aspect of your life. Before continuing, tell me in the comments, where do you feel you are on this journey now? Are you still stuck in your persona, starting to see your shadow, or are you already beginning your individuation? I really want to know where this content is touching you, how self-knowledge changes your real life. It is common to think that self-knowledge is something abstract, almost philosophical, interesting to talk about, but difficult to apply. But this could not be further from the truth. Knowing yourself changes everything, precisely because it changes the starting point of all your choices. When you begin to observe yourself honestly, you better understand why you act in certain ways, why you repeat patterns in relationships, why you feel dissatisfied even when you have it all. Life stops being a sequence of automatic reactions and starts to become a conscious construction. One of the first practical effects of self-knowledge is in decision-making. When you align yourself with who you really are, your choices are no longer guided by external pressure or insecurity. You start to say no without guilt, avoid environments that don't match your values, and seek what really makes sense, even if it goes against other people's expectations. This applies to small everyday choices, such as how you organize your time, and also to big decisions such as changing careers, ending a relationship, or starting a personal project that represents your inner truth. Another impact is on relationships. When you are still living in your persona, you tend to attract connections based on appearance, convenience, or neediness. But as you connect with yourself, your essence, you begin to relate with more presence, listening, and depth. You stop looking for someone who completes you and start meeting people who share your wholeness. Furthermore, self-knowledge reduces the constant need for approval. This does not mean becoming cold or antisocial, but learning to maintain your identity even when it does not please everyone. You become less reactive, more centered, less easily influenced. The opinion of others ceases to be a barometer of your validity. Another powerful gain is emotional strengthening. When you integrate your shadow and recognize your weaknesses, they stop dominating you behind your back. Difficult emotions don't disappear, but they stop being monsters in the dark. You learn to recognize what you feel, name it, embrace it, and act with more balance. And there is also the birth of a new kind of peace. Not the artificial peace of those who avoid conflicts to keep up appearances, but a genuine peace, which comes from being aligned internally. This peace does not depend on ideal circumstances, but on coherence between what you feel, think, and do. Stories like these are more common than they seem. People who, when delving into self-knowledge, discovered that their dream career was, in fact, an emotional prison. They realized they were in relationships that only fed their persona, but never their heart. They understood that their anxiety actually came from living a life disconnected from themselves. By knowing yourself, you regain what is most essential, the right to be who you are, and that changes everything, because deep down, almost all of the deepest problems we face arise from internal disconnection. But if self-knowledge is so transformative, where do you start? What do you do when you are stuck in the confusion between what you feel, what you think, and what you have learned to look like? That's what we'll look at in the next chapter. Practical steps to start your inner journey in a realistic, intimate, and powerful way. First steps to beginning your inner journey. Many people feel the call to change, to know themselves better, but get stuck at the first obstacle. Where do I start? The journey of self-knowledge may seem intimidating, but it always starts with a simple step: looking inside yourself with honesty. The first exercise is self-observation without judgment. Instead of criticizing yourself or trying to correct yourself all the time, start by simply observing. How do you react when you are upset? What situations make you feel angry, ashamed, or anxious? When do you feel like you are pretending or acting? This constant observation is like shining a flashlight in the dark. At first, you will only see fragments, but little by little, you will begin to understand patterns that you previously missed. Another important step is to ask yourself, what masks do I wear in my day-to-day life? You can write about this. In what contexts do you come across as more serious, quieter, more friendly, more controlling? These personas are not wrong, but they can reveal how you've learned to survive socially and where you're losing yourself. A powerful exercise is to pay attention to the judgments you make of others. What you criticize most in people, be it selfishness, coldness, or emotional dependence, usually says something about something unresolved within yourself. It is the projection of your shadow asking for attention. Journaling or therapeutic writing can be very helpful in this process. Write about what you felt during the day, what you avoided saying, where you felt most authentic or most fake. Over time, this creates a deep and revealing inner dialogue. Another resource is to seek moments of silence and voluntary solitude. The rush of everyday life tends to distance us from ourselves. It is in silence, without distractions, without screens, without stimuli, that you begin to hear what was muffled. And it doesn't have to be a retreat, just 10 or 15 minutes a day dedicated to yourself, with presence. If possible, also consider psychotherapy. A good therapist can act as a mirror and a guide, not to tell you who you are, but to help you remove the noise that prevents you from listening to yourself. Most importantly, be patient with the process. Don't expect quick answers or immediate changes. Self-awareness is like cultivating a seed. At first, you'll only see dirt, but if you keep nurturing it, something will start to grow from the inside out. And remember, the fact that you are here, reading and reflecting, is already part of the journey. Most people live on autopilot. Just the desire to understand yourself already puts you on a different path. If this content is helping you, please like the video. This shows us that it is worth continuing to create this type of deep reflection, and also help spread this message to more people who, like you, want to reconnect with their truth. In the next and final chapter, we'll tie together everything we've seen so far with an inspiring final message, so you can continue your journey with more clarity, courage, and purpose. You're ready, you just need to remember. You don't have to become someone completely different. You don't have to reach some unattainable ideal. The truth is that everything you seek, meaning, clarity, strength, freedom, is already within you. What is often missing is not something to be achieved out there, but something to be remembered here inside. Remembering who you are before the masks, before the demands, before the comparisons. Remembering your essence, your value, your place in the world. The path to self-knowledge, as we have seen, is not always easy, but it is real, it is transformative, and it is available to those who have the courage to look at themselves with truth and continue walking, even if slowly, towards themselves. If this video touched you in any way, subscribe to the channel now. This allows us to continue producing content with depth and authenticity and ensures that you are always close by, following along with us on this journey from the inside out. You're not starting from scratch, you're coming home.